FBI building that is currently named on behalf of J. Edgar Hoover. No support for housing. No support for food assistance. No support for child care. 50 million Americans newly unemployed. Emergency unemployment benefits scheduled to expire in 2 days, and the Republicans want to cut those benefits by $400 per week. It should shock the conscience. That is not an adequate response. It's an inhumane, cruel, cold-hearted response to this pandemic. We are going to continue to make the case to the American people, as we have done for 2.5 months, that the coronavirus pandemic is an extraordinary crisis and requires an extraordinary congressional intervention in the form of the HEROES Act. We have passed it 2.5 months ago, and the Senate Republicans have done nothing. And things haven't gotten better, they've gotten worse. And that's shameful. Any questions?
Realizing that the talks are very early, Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer came out last night and made clear that the liability protection language that McConnell is insisting upon is going to be a real problem for Democrats. I'm wondering if that is because of the way it's written or because of its inclusion at all. Is there any version of liability protection that Democrats would support, as you did in the very first emergency response relating to the manufacture of masks?
Well, there's no version of blanket liability that Democrats, in my view, could ever support, because that would open up the door to bad actors conducting themselves in ways where their customers or their employers could be exposed recklessly to the deadly consequences of the coronavirus. In my view, it's always reasonable to figure out, in the midst of an extraordinary crisis, whether we can look at a framework that makes sense, that puts consumers, everyday Americans, and employees first, not last, as the liability provision in the Republican bill seems to do at this moment.
You said no version of blanket liability. Is there a version of liability that you could accept?
Well, I'm not prepared to, but that's a discussion that we haven't had yet across the broad spectrum of the House Democratic Caucus. I support the position articulated by Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer. When we have a reasonable bill put forth by Senate Republicans for us to discuss, let's have a discussion about our differences and then figure out where we can find common ground. The current version is reckless and irresponsible, and as the president said himself, irrelevant.
But bill text was initially the marker for starting the negotiations, so regardless of what's in that, don't you have it now as a yard line to say this is where they stand to meet in the middle? What's your understanding in your caucus of how willing your members are going to be to give on some of these negotiations, the speaker where she's going to come down in some places and where the Republicans are going to meet you in the middle?
Well, Republicans have provided no reasonable explanation as to why they need liability protection. There hasn't been a flood of lawsuits over the last 6 months in the context of the coronavirus pandemic. In fact, there hasn't even been a trickle. So what is this all about, Mitch? It appears to be another giveaway to multinational corporations, the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. This is what Senate Republicans do. We know that because when they had complete control of government, their top priority was to jam the reckless GOP tax scam down the throats of the American people, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%. They're up to their old tricks right now. In terms of negotiation, here's the difference. We passed the HEROES Act with modest Republican support on the Hill, Peter King having voted for it, and significant Republican support out in the country amongst Republican governors, county executives, mayors, town supervisors, and people at the state and local level who realize that meaningful intervention for state and local stabilization is necessary. We have a bipartisan bill that actually has passed one house of Congress. The Republicans don't even have a bill that the Senate Republican Conference uniformly supports. The president says it's semi-irrelevant. What is there to negotiate? They have put forth a fiction of a response. So that's the challenge, in my humble opinion, that we have, because we don't even have a serious proposal from them.
Given the pace of talks and how things seem to be deadlocked, Mnuchin is now once again talking about a short-term UI extension. Is that something that you would consider? I mean, as you said, people's benefits are running out in 2 days. It doesn't look like you're going to get a big deal in 2 days.
Well, in my view, the position that has previously been articulated by Speaker Pelosi, which is that we don't support a short-term extension, is the position that I currently hold until we have a broader discussion as we approach the Friday deadline about the best way to proceed. But the starting point seems to me to be the Republicans needing to put forth a reasonable proposal and show that they are serious about addressing the pain, suffering, and death that has been visited upon the American people by the coronavirus pandemic and the wildly inadequate response coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Because again, this is not a serious proposal. You know, the eviction moratorium has expired. You've got people in Columbus, Ohio, who are being evicted at an alarming rate, so much so that the mayor has been forced to open up the Columbus Convention Center as a temporary homeless shelter. This is America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And this is what's happening. And the Republicans want to cut unemployment insurance emergency benefits in this context and can't even produce a serious proposal that they support on the Senate Republican side.
If I could follow up on flexibility on your side, are you guys insisting on $600 a week? Are you flexible on that? We've heard different messages from Mr. Hoyer, from other people on the Democratic side. Are you guys willing to be flexible at all?
We haven't had a conversation about that. I would say nothing should be agreed upon or disagreed upon until we see what an entire package of relief could look like, because there are several components. But certainly, extending unemployment insurance emergency benefits is critical, in my view, at the current level that exists. Almost $1 trillion in state and local stabilization is critical, because if we allow state and local budgets to collapse, that will undermine public education, public health, public safety, public transportation, public housing, and the provision of public goods provided by state and local governments. That would be a disaster on top of the existing disaster that already we're being faced with here in America. So that would be, to me, a line in the sand that's important. Our bill, with great leadership from Chairwoman Maxine Waters, provides approximately $175 billion in assistance to tenants and homeowners who are struggling to pay their rent and mortgage. Seems to me that that's an important provision. We also provide an additional round of direct stimulus payments. The Republicans seem to have moved closer to our position in that regard, but they're still not where we are at, which is to provide up to $6,000 per family of 5 in the midst of a recession, possibly heading toward a Trump-induced depression. It seems to me that we need a robust additional round of direct stimulus. So it's hard to say that we'll compromise on one particular area of significance without seeing the entirety of the package.
Different topic. You were in the committee room yesterday with Attorney General Barr, and we were talking to Leader Hoyer outside of the room, and he said that Judiciary Oversight, I think Benny Thompson at DHS, are all working on some sort of legislative response to the protests in Portland and Seattle, but also to Lafayette Square to ensure that these types of things don't happen again. Just curious, what are your options as you're looking at different legislative responses? What is possible? What control, what power does Congress have to push back against these sorts of events?
Well, first and foremost, we have our oversight responsibilities, and so yesterday's hearing was important in that regard. The job of the Attorney General is to serve as the people's lawyer. What was clearly demonstrated at the hearing yesterday is that Bill Barr has undermined democracy, undermined the Constitution, and undermined the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. Bill Barr's actions have been reckless and irresponsible because he is there simply to do the political bidding of Donald Trump. We exposed that to the American people yesterday. So that was important in the context of our oversight responsibilities. Moving forward, Chairman Benny Thompson of the Homeland Security Committee, presumably working in partnership with Chairman Jerry Nadler and others, will try to come together as it relates to an appropriate legislative response, but those aren't discussions that I've been part of. I support the notion that we need to make sure that the rule of law is protected, because in Trump's America, traditional norms mean nothing. We've seen that repeatedly. And so values that we have taken for granted during previous administrations, be they Democratic or Republican, have been shattered by this White House, this Department of Justice, and this administration. And so generally, I think a legislative response is appropriate. The specifics of that are unclear.
Would that come this year, or is that something for 2021?
That's unclear.
In a similar
I'm sorry.
vein.
No, if she's following up, that's fine.
Oh, no, it's
Did you
okay.
have a follow-up?
Thank you, yes. Would you support opening an impeachment inquiry into Attorney General Barr based off of what you heard yesterday and the actions that you believe he's taken?
I support the normal legislative process, the oversight process, and the fact that in 97 days, the American people will have an opportunity to determine whether Donald Trump should be a one-term president.
Totally separate topic. It appears that Louis Gohmert has tested positive for the coronavirus just now. Do you worry about the safety of your members as they continue to fly, back in and around the country? He obviously regularly does not wear a mask on the House floor.
I'm concerned about the irresponsible behavior of many of the Republicans who have chosen to consistently flout well-established public health guidance, perhaps out of fealty to their boss, Donald Trump, who is the head of the anti-mask movement in America. That's a concern. And it's my plea to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for their own health, safety, and well-being, for the health, safety, and well-being of their colleagues, their families, their neighbors, and their constituents, that they stop politicizing public health guidance and do the right thing, because they are jeopardizing the safety and well-being of others. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Jeffries.
you.
Thank you.
Mike, we were like 2 feet from Gohmert yesterday.
Was he wearing a mask?
No.
No. Did that come out on Twitter?
so he was supposed to go with Trump to the White House, to Texas today, I guess, so he did test positive at the White House.
We got tested.
He
Probably,
probably got tested yesterday then, and then they were like, you can't come. Yeah.
or this morning.
Usually they
Remember
do.
the start of all this, it was Gomer who was charging around the Capitol with like 60 people behind him, and he was doing a tour.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like the only guy we know now.
and they had like about to close tour or something, like it was really, it was
Yeah, it
far
was
into
it was like it was the last day